Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Murder Church on the air. Finally made it in here. Thanks everyone for coming through. Please hit the old like. Share this out if you could. Pretty lacking this morning on the old shares. I just sent it out on X. But yeah, send it to the socials. And if you could post it in the different Discords you may be in, that'd be dope too. Yeah, episode 57. Phil Spector. Still going. Let's rock.
Let's rock.
I made it. The hell's up, everybody? Woo! Made it to Sunday. Yeah, I was up a little bit late last night watching some wrestling. It was the WWE Royal Rumble. It was a pretty good one. Let me go ahead and hit the bells before we forget. And also, that's not even working because the power went out this morning. Had to come in and set up my stuff, but let me get the stream deck on so we can hear some noises. We can hear some sounds like the bells. There they are. Church bells will start us out just fine. I have a big day today. We're going to be hanging out here for probably the next, 2 hours or so. And then actually even before that, 3:45 p.m. Eastern time today, I have a horrible, incredibly wild, brutal Andre the Giant story that's coming out on the Wrestling Channel. It's pretty horrendous. It is a horrific story, a dark tale, if you will, by a beloved individual. And then tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time, I'm going to have Lauren Conlon on here to talk Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes. And it's going to be pretty good. It's going to be a good one, I think. So, yeah, everyone, thank you for being here. And, yeah, I got the bells out of the way. Hell yeah. One thing I need to do, we're going to be starting out this morning with James Pex. James Pex takes the stand. Blood splatter expert James Pex. So let me see. I've got to get his name in here as well. Yeah, of course, I've still got some, anybody that doesn't know, I got magnets now. We'll be doing those on the wheel. Yesterday we had a wheel go all the way. No, we didn't actually. Hold on. Yesterday on the Coburger stream, there were some folks coming through. Let me see where we're at. Where are we at right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're only 2 away right now from finishing up a wheel. So yeah, hopefully we'll get that going. Finish her up. Yeah, let's see who's in here this morning. Got Amber hanging out, Pokemon hanging out, Pammy, Kathy, Cheeny. Cheeny, yes, indeedy. Jersey Jen. Hell yeah, welcome in this morning. Gonna hang out just a little bit. Oasis Cat's in here. Hell yeah. I'll get to see it. BGOG, Wild Side. Wonder how many people are coming through at 9 this morning. They're like, what the hell's going on? Where's the pastor? Dave, dude, the groundhog, apparently, I saw that in Discord. I don't know whichever was which. I'm going to go look right now. Hold on. Phil sees his shadow and predicts 6 more weeks of winter. Phil, you can go straight to hell, you son of a bitch. All right, you don't bring that shit out here. We're done with it. We're done with it, dude. We're not fucking around. Yeah, let's get in here. Let's see what's up. I'll change this live as we go. I think I've got this all ready to rock and roll. We'll keep on trucking. It's all we can do now.
Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is James Pex, P-E-X.
Good morning, Mr. Pex.
Good morning.
You and I spoke for the first time a couple of weeks ago.
That's correct.
Okay. Had you been involved in this matter before then?
No.
Okay. You wrote an article, sir, and one of the reasons why you're here, entitled Observations of High Velocity Blood Spatter on Adjacent Objects. Did you not?
Yes, I did about 20 years ago.
Okay. And did you have a co-author?
Yes, I did.
And would that be Mr. Charles Vaughn?
That's correct.
And the common parlay for your article would be an article written then by Mr. Pex and Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
And that was back spatter and blood spatter?
Yes.
Okay. Now, before you actually wrote that article, you do have a history or an education in police work, do you not?
Yes, I do.
I think we
Okay.
just finished
Could
out
you
that will. I see Kathy came through the email also, Jen. Bada bing, bada boom. Possibility of getting some of those. Thank you very much. And then Kathy coming through with a 420. Would love a chance at some stickers and a magnet. Hell yeah, I shouldn't say that part. I had that myself. Thank you so much, Kathy. Appreciate it. That is a wheel ready to go.
Tell us, sir, what your educational background is first.
I received my bachelor's degree at the Oregon Institute of Technology in 1969 in the field of medical technology. After that, I attended graduate school at San Francisco State University for a period of time, and then I finally finished up and got my master's degree, primarily in the field of chemistry from Southern Oregon University, and that was in 1976.
Okay. And when you attended San Francisco State University for that period of time, what were you majoring in then?
I was taking classes advanced classes in medical technology that included nuclear physics.
Okay. And after you graduated, did you go into any area of practice with a police agency?
Yes. In 1978, I joined the Oregon State Police as a state trooper.
And prior to that, had you had a job in private industry?
Yes, I was a medical technologist in a hospital and had done that for about 10 years.
Okay, and what is a medical technologist?
That is a person who works in a clinical laboratory and conducts analytical testing on biological specimens from patients within the hospital.
Okay, and then what brought you to become employed with the Oregon State Police, sir?
Well, it's at that time in forensic science, it was difficult to perform blood typing tests on dried blood stains. And members of the local crime laboratory were visiting me and looking to collect standards of various blood types to utilize in trying to apply methods that were published by the FBI. They were having difficulties in getting these tests to work. In my spare time in the laboratory, I worked on them also and was able to get them to work and would demonstrate them to the people from the laboratory. Eventually decided I could do this better than they could, and I eventually went to work for the Oregon State Police Crime Lab.
And did the FBI adopt your procedures in terms of getting this blood typing area to work?
Well, I made their methods work, let's put it that way.
Okay. And so the Oregon State Police hired you. And what were you hired as, sir?
I was hired as a state trooper, a sworn police officer, and attended recruit school.
Did I miss a spec? Hold on.
I made their methods work, let's put it that way.
Okay. And so the Oregon State Police hired you. And what were you hired as, sir?
I was hired as a state trooper, a sworn police officer, and attended recruit school like other officers do. And upon graduation from recruit school, I was assigned to the crime laboratory. I was in Eugene, Oregon.
And how long were you there and in what capacity?
He's hanging out over there. Actually, I think I got the same hair as the one on my lower third there.
I worked in the Eugene Crime Laboratory for approximately 10 years as a forensic scientist. In that role, it was our responsibility to be generalist criminalists. We attended crime scenes. We collected our own evidence, did our own photography. We brought this evidence back to the laboratory, conducted tests upon it, published reports, and testified as experts in court as to our findings.
Did you do any work in serology when you were working for the lab in Oregon at that point?
Sure. Based upon, of course, my educational background, there wasn't anyone else in the laboratory that had that kind of background, and so I was the primary serologist at that time and doing blood typing tests up until the time I was promoted.
Okay, and I guess I should ask you the basic question, what is a serologist?
A serologist is a person who examines biological fluids within the crime laboratory.
Under a microscope?
Under a microscope, uses biochemical testing, advanced chemical procedures like electrophoresis, and serologists today are also do DNA testing.
Okay. And then after you were promoted, what were you promoted to, sir?
I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant and became the director of a crime laboratory on the Oregon coast.
Okay. And when you say you were the director of a crime laboratory, was that for the Oregon State Police?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And did you hold the director position of a crime laboratory until you retired?
Yes, I did.
And then from what was the lifespan that you were director of a state police laboratory in Oregon?
I became director at the beginning of 1990. I was also an interim director for another crime laboratory in Oregon as well. And I retired from the Oregon State Police in 2002.
Okay. And the other crime lab that you were an interim director for, what were the circumstances surrounding that?
They had not hired another permanent director. They were coming up on their ASCLD accreditation, and I was assigned not only to run the current crime laboratory I was operating, but also to run that laboratory and prepare it for ASCLD inspection.
So the laboratory that you did run officially for the Oregon State Police, was that an ASCLD certified laboratory?
Yes, it was.
And could you tell us what ASCLD means? We've had some testimony on it already, but just tell the jurors again if you could.
An ASCLD accredited laboratory is one that has standardized procedures, goes through a validation process for those procedures. The people who work within the laboratory have to meet certain criteria. Every 5 years, a team from outside the state will come in and inspect the work that you do in that laboratory, look at your procedures, look at the safety standards, the health standards, and you have to meet certain requirements before your laboratory will pass. It's also necessary that individuals with, usually in the management staff, conduct annual audits of other laboratories, which I also did as well.
So let's go back to the interim lab. While you're director of one lab, you're also heading an interim lab in an interim position in order for it to get its ASCLD certification?
That's correct. All of the laboratories in Oregon have met ASCLD accreditation standards since 1985, but we were coming up on our 5-year inspection, and it was necessary to have someone to oversee and prepare the other laboratory for that inspection process.
And did you do that?
Yes.
Okay. And you also indicated that when you are head of a laboratory, during the year you have to conduct audits as the head of the laboratory in order to meet ASCLD. Did I understand that correctly?
That's right. You, as a laboratory manager, you peer review and oversee the people that are working for you. But also once a year, you become part of a team that goes to another laboratory and reviews the work that's being done there and ensures that the laboratory meets the accreditation standards.
Okay, so you're pretty familiar, would it be fair to say, with these procedures and the audits?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you talked about, just to mention before, peer review. What is that?
Peer review can be, in some instances, where a person, say, examines a bullet under a microscope. He may ask another person to come over and look at the bullets also. That is a beginning process of peer review. You know, are you seeing what I'm seeing, sort of thing. There is another step where the paperwork that you generate, the notes that you generate, are reviewed by another person. That is a process of peer review. Then there is an administrative peer review where the laboratory manager or someone of that nature will make sure that the proper procedures were followed and when the tests were conducted.
Okay. Is there a difference between internal peer review and external peer review?
Yes.
And what is that?
An internal peer review is within the laboratory and within the management of that laboratory. An external peer review is when people from outside that laboratory come in and actually pull case files in different disciplines and review them to ensure that they meet accreditation standards.
Okay. And now we're talking about your laboratory work. While you were director of the lab, did you also perform any functions in terms of crime scene investigations or criminalist functions?
Yes, these are the laboratories that we're talking about here had personnel sizes of 5 to 10 people. You may be a director, but you are a working director. 50% of my responsibility is the performance of tests and going to crime scenes and maintaining my role as a forensic scientist within the laboratory.
Okay. Now, we just deviated a little bit, but when you talked about ASCLD, you also were a delegate for the American Society of Crime Lab Directors?
Yes.
What does that mean?
That means, well, most people that are directors of laboratories are part of the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors, and we occasionally attended meetings of directors and basically set the course or the future of inspections in laboratories in general.
Okay. Now, did you have other duties besides those associated with blood when you were a working director of this laboratory?
Yes.
What were those, sir?
As I mentioned earlier, I processed crime scenes, did photography. I was a firearms examiner, which means I compared bullets and cartridge cases under the microscope, reconstructed trajectories of bullets, that sort of thing, and testified as an expert in a court on the cases that I worked.
Okay. Going back then to the area where you're dealing with firearms, you have then a working knowledge of firearms, both as a police officer and as a criminalist in a crime lab?
Yes.
Okay. And did you use that working knowledge in your investigation and article that we talked about concerning blood spatter?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you also have some specialty certifications, do you not?
Yes, I do.
And what are those, if you could tell the jury, please?
I am a board-certified member of the American Board of Criminalistics. I call that a diplomat. I've taken a national examination in forensic science and passed the exam.
That means that a third party considered you an expert in the area of criminalistics?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, please. I interrupted you.
Of course, I was a certified police officer with the Oregon State Police, now retired, of course. And while I was a certified medical technologist under the American Society of Clinical Pathology, I also had a specialist certification in clinical chemistry.
Did you maintain any professional affiliations with organizations that specialize in dealing with criminalistics or crime scenes or ballistics?
Yes, and when you have your own business and you retire from a government agency, one of the most difficult aspects is trying to keep up with the field and keeping up with science. So in order to do so, I belong to a number of organizations so I can get their newsletters and get information. I belong to the American Society of Forensic Sciences, the Northwest Association of Forensic Scientists, the International Association of Bloodstain Pattern Analysts, the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners, of course, the American Board of Criminalistics, and the International Association for Identification.
Okay. And are you active in all those professional affiliations?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, have you published articles in the area of criminalistics that would also involve blood spatter or ballistics?
Yes, I've published over 20 articles.
Okay. And have you done that over the course of your past 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, almost 30 years.
Okay. And one of the articles was the article we mentioned earlier, the Pex and Vaughn article?
Yes.
Okay. Did you also publish articles on accidental discharges of guns?
Yes.
And did you have additional specialized training over the past 20 years? In other words, in some of these areas that you've been talking to the jury with, or did you just stop when you became employed by the Oregon State Police?
No, it's as I try to maintain my skills as a forensic scientist, I have attended meetings and attended seminars on issues associated with forensic science.
Okay. And in fact, additionally, did you receive a number of awards concerning your work in the police field?
Yes.
Okay. And did you continue your work in an area also involving an item called luminol?
Yes.
What is luminol?
Luminol is a chemical that forms a reaction, usually with metallic substances, and it's kind of unique in that it will actually luminesce. It will emit a light, and it's very weak, and if you turn out all of the lights in the room and there is a substance on the floor that may contain metallics, that luminol will react with it and actually illuminate the area.
Okay.
It's called
And-
chemiluminescence.
And have you published on that?
Yes, I have.
All right. Now, additionally, in receiving specialized training during the period of years and doing these articles and getting these recognition awards, did you ever train other criminalists or police officers or other scientists in any of these areas?
Yes, I was an instructor with Oregon Department of Public Safety and Standards in Oregon, and I trained police officers and other forensic scientists over the course of my career on a number of occasions in issues dealing with forensic science, crime scene investigations, bloodstain pattern analysis especially,
Okay.
and photography.
And photography. And why is photography important when you're training police officers?
Because most of the time they do a terrible job of it, I guess.
Okay.
I have taught photography to police officers probably 20 of the 30 years I've been in this business. Is something you have to keep doing and keep training them at because that's not a normal part of attending their recruit school and their normal training. It's not only important to talk about the aspects of the camera, but what you need to photograph at a scene in terms of what's important in a case.
Do you ever discuss during these training seminars in your years of experience whether or not police officers should wear booties at a crime scene, for instance?
Yes, it's important to cover the clothing that you have so you don't bring trace evidence into a crime scene, or that you don't take evidence or biohazards with you out of the crime scene.
Okay. And have you ever taught about vacuuming in an area of a crime scene, for instance, when you're training these police officers?
Yes. There are a number of specialized vacuum cleaners that are made for our profession. They're designed to capture basically the particulates that the vacuum cleaner would pick up and allow you to examine those particulates under a microscope. We look for trace evidence, fibers, hairs, bits of gunpowder particles. It has multiple uses and depending upon the type of crime that you're investigating.
Okay. Why is it important not to bring evidence into a scene or bring trace evidence out of a scene?
Well, I think that's pretty natural. If you're going to do an extensive examination of a crime scene, you don't want to introduce evidence to the area that is of interest to you. So you cover your shoes. It's not uncommon today for people to wear complete suits, including a mask. It's important that you don't contaminate yourself and from biohazards that may be associated with the scene, and you don't want to take whatever biohazards you may pick up at a scene back to your place of employment or back to your home.
Okay. Now, since you've retired, have you continued any work in criminal investigation?
Oh yes, that's.
What are you doing now, sir?
I have my own business, and I consult in forensic science for both, and have in the past 5 years for both the prosecution and the defense.
Have you ever testified when you were employed by the Oregon State Police? Have you ever testified for the defense?
Yes, I did.
How many occasions would you say?
Not very often. Over the course of my almost 25 years with the state police, naturally, I was subpoenaed primarily by the prosecution, but on occasion I would be subpoenaed by the defense as well.
In the business that you have now, do you employ people or do you have cases that you're actively dealing with?
I do both. I have associates within my business that assist me in casework, and also I continue to work cases that come through my business. Like in this one here, someone calls me up and asks me questions and wants to retain me. That happens both from the prosecution and from the defense.
Are you exclusive to the prosecution or the defense in your
No.
business?
No.
And
I would have to say that most of the calls come from the defense.
Are you getting paid for your testimony?
Yes.
Did you get paid when you were an Oregon State Police Director?
Yes, I did.
Now, one of the reasons that you discussed was the luminol issue that you have written and published on. Now, did we ask you to review the luminol procedures and anything with regard to this case?
Yes.
Okay, what did you review, sir?
I looked at the procedures manual for the performance of luminol testing, and there were, I read some transcript of the people who did luminol testing,
Okay.
and had discussions with you and others regarding that testing.
And you looked at some photographs also?
Yes.
Okay. Did you bring with you the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Scientific Services Bureau Biology Manual?
No, I did not.
Did you review that?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, rather than if I walk, 'cause this is the, could we have this marked? Rather than walking
Next
up.
is octuple R.
Thank you. Okay. And Mr. Pex, I'm just going to show this from you. You recall looking at this?
Yes, I
Right.
do.
Okay. And did that have a procedure for luminol in it?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Now, in an ASCLD lab, do the manual numbers, the procedure numbers that are indicated on the manual have any meaning?
Yes, that's,
Way back.
they follow a numerical sequence that's generally consistent from laboratory to laboratory.
Okay. And in the analytical procedures, did you see a procedure in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for different luminol testing?
Yes,
And what number was that, if you recall?
I don't recall.
Would 4.1.3 sound familiar?
That could be, yes.
Okay. And the procedures that you reviewed with regard to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, they were conformed with ASCLD procedures as you know them when you were investigating laboratories or auditing laboratories?
Excuse me, what? Ass-clad procedures? Did I hear that right?
Yes,
Okay. And is that required that the numbers and the standards conform with the ASCLD procedures?
the numerical sequence that is assigned them is typical of what you see in an ASCLD manual.
Why is
I wouldn't
that?
say that from state to state they would be exactly the same.
Okay. And why is that generally, from ASCLD perspective?
When you're conducting an inspection and you make notations or recommendations, you can go specifically to a particular section, a specific particular test and subsection of that test, and make reference.
Okay. Now, you did say that you reviewed some of the photographs with regard to this case and reviewed the testimony of Mr. Renteria?
Yes.
Okay. One of the photographs you reviewed, GGGG, please, Jennifer. We're going to put up on, this is the computer screen we're using, Mr. Prex. And if you can't see it, I have another photograph here. I can walk it up to you, okay? All right. Is this one of the photographs that you reviewed?
Yes.
Was this important to you in any way when discussing luminol procedures?
If the luminol was conducted after this photograph was taken, that would be of some concern.
Why?
There are so many people that are in this crime scene. We didn't do it this way, but I'm not in control of how other agencies conduct their investigations.
Why is the amount of people important when you're looking for blood spatter, if you're looking for blood spatter in luminol?
When liquid blood falls on any adjacent objects, it dries. And if you compress it or you walk on it, you break it up, and it forms basically a dust. And as you move around the room, you're going to transport that on your shoes, and if you're on your hands and knees, you could actually transport it on your fingers from place to place.
Okay.
And then if you luminol later, you may see that,
Okay. Or you may not?
or you may not.
Okay. And, Your Honor, I don't think this picture's been marked. The next picture would be 2.055.
Octuple S.
Okay. You reviewed this picture also, correct?
Yes.
And why was this picture important to you?
The position of the hand is certainly would be of value if we had better photographs of this. At this point in time, there have been plastic sheets that have been laid down on the floor, but in a circumstance or a crime such as this, it's important to have some better photographs of the hands.
Okay. And also in dealing with the luminol procedure, did you review the
Almost braided it on Feral Friday, Dave.
fact that the carpet in this case was not cut out and brought to the crime
I gave
lab?
up.
Yes.
I did it for like 2
What
seconds.
significance of that was there to you with regard to whether or not the luminol was proper?
Well, we discussed the concept as related to the article that was mentioned about small droplets are created in a shooting circumstance, small droplets of blood, and these bloods project back towards the shooter if the particular shooting circumstances is such that the muzzle of the weapon is very close to the individual at the time. If it was important to know how far that these droplets may have projected, the best technique is to excise that carpet, take it back to the laboratory, and look at it under the microscope.
Right. Is luminol ever indicated to you for use in a blood spatter identification or pattern?
Not when you're looking for small droplets of blood. There is a problem from a standpoint is that luminol is applied with a hand sprayer. The chemicals are mixed and you spray it onto whatever object is of interest to you in total darkness. The droplets that are coming out of the sprayer can be of the same size as the ones you're looking for, and you could potentially misinterpret a pattern when in reality what you're looking at is the droplets themselves as opposed to actual blood.
Can you even find the droplets with luminol generally?
It depends on their size. If they're large enough, and generally what we refer to as passive droplets of blood, I would not be afraid to identify with luminol, but when they get smaller than that, when you're looking at droplets of a 1/4 inch or less in diameter, I would be concerned in using that procedure as your identification mechanism.
What is the proper procedure when you're looking at blood droplets a 1/4 of an inch or less in terms of what you taught police officers and what you understand for ASCLD certification?
The proper procedure is to conduct a microscopic examination under preferably a field scope.
What is a field scope?
A field scope or a stereo microscope. It is one that has a great deal of depth of field, so you don't have your object very close to the microscope, very close to your object that you want to look at, but has magnifications generally ranging from about 5 power up to about 60 power.
Okay, I interrupted you. You said the proper way is to use a
Right.
field scope?
Right, you would use a microscope, you would look at a garment, or if
Once I
we
get down
mentioned
there.
excising a piece of carpet, you would look at the carpet. If you found something of interest, then you would perform a chemical test upon that. The common test is called phenolphthalein. This is a screening test. If that test is positive, then you would go on to confirm that it's blood, and there are tests available to do
Hell
that.
yeah. Good tonight.
Okay. What is luminol generally used for when you're looking for blood?
Luminol is the process you normally encounter if we have a surface where we want to see transfers of blood, where someone may have been dragged, for example, or pools of blood where someone has cleaned it up. You can't see it because either the color of the substance or that it's been so dilute that it's not readily visible to the eye. Then you would apply the luminol process in order to find these areas. After you found these areas, then you would go back to the process of the confirmation. Luminol does not identify or confirm the presence of blood. It is a screening test.
And if blood is ground into small stains or ground into a rug, would luminol be the proper technique for trying to find them?
Be safe.
No,
Is that because you may not even see them if they're there?
that's correct.
Okay. And so do you have to at least get down on your hands and knees with the field scope at the scene if you're going to leave the carpet there, if it's looking for blood? Spatter.
Spatter.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And did you see any indication in this case that that was done?
No.
Okay. As a person who was written about blood spatter and also written about luminol and taught about blood spatter and luminol, would you ever teach people in the lab that you ran to look for microscopic particles of blood spatter by using a luminol technique?
No.
Would you ever make a determination as to how far blood spatter could go outwards from, for instance, a gunshot wound by using the luminol technique?
No.
May we have, Jennifer, another picture, I don't know if it has been marked on a 3.136. Let's see if it comes up. 3.136. No, it has not. I need a mark.
The octuple T.
Okay. With regard to the luminol, you did look at this picture of the handgun, correct?
Yes.
In this case. Was there something on this handgun that you saw that concerned you as to whether or not the luminol technique had been done properly?
Well, I think we need to differentiate properly versus did it cover a specific area.
Okay, thank you. That's
Okay.
fine.
The test may very well have been done properly. This handgun was seen in some other photographs lying beside Ms. Clarkson's leg. And this is the side that would have been down towards the carpet. In a shooting circumstance, at the time that that weapon actually hit the floor, that probably that blood was in a liquid state, which means that the blood that is on the handle and other areas of this weapon could easily transfer to the carpet itself.
Okay. And you were aware that there was, the luminol technique did not reveal blood under the handgun?
I didn't see any evidence of that in what I saw read.
Would that appear to you to be inconsistent with what's on this handgun? That result?
I'm not sure about what you mean by inconsistent. If this weapon transferred blood to the carpet at that location, by luminol testing, the stain should have been large enough, you probably would have detected it.
Okay. Now, you said you saw another picture of the handgun lying under Ms. Clarkson's feet. May I just show you 1.213? Okay. Is that one of the pictures that you indicated you'd seen? Yes, that's the one. Was there something else in there that you saw that concerned you concerning the luminol technique and whether or not it could identify blood spatter going out 3 feet?
Repeat your question.
I'm sorry. Was there something else in this picture that concerned you that you pointed out to us concerning the luminol technique?
As I indicated, if this weapon it would probably have blood on it in a near contact shooting circumstance, I would expect that blood would transfer to that carpet where that gun is lying.
Thank you. Jennifer, could we have double E, please? Now, you also looked at this picture, did you not, sir?
Yes.
And in terms of determining whether or not the blood spatter had gone out 3 feet or more, was there something in this picture that bothered you as to the position of the legs?
In our discussions of the case and the ongoing sequences within this case, that particular wire that you see on the carpet is consistent with a wire that leads from a weapon called a taser. And that wire...
The heat is already? Are you fucking kidding me? Son of a bitch, Pokemon.
Was underneath Ms. Clarkson's shoe in that area there. And that was an event that, to my understanding, occurred after she was shot.
Why was that important to you in determining whether or not blood spatter could go out 3 feet or more?
Well, there's I did not observe what appeared to be any blood spatter in the photographs of her legs.
Okay. And go ahead, I interrupted you. Okay. Did this picture indicate to you whether or not this was the final resting place of Ms. Clarkson's legs?
It suggests that it's a final resting place of her legs, yes.
Okay. Could you tell from this picture whether or not her legs were in a different position at the time she was shot in terms of determining how far the blood spatter went out?
It appears that if that wire is underneath her shoe and that event occurred after she was shot, then her legs would have to have been in a different position.
Okay.
If her legs were, for example, tucked under her, then there may not be any blood that got on her legs in that position.
Okay. Now, did you see any indication that the carpet was cut out from underneath where her legs were to look for a luminol back at the, or to look for blood spatter back at the crime lab?
No, I did not.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you have written on and testified to fairly extensively, as you indicated, is blood spatter, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And blood spatter could be forward spatter or back spatter, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the article that you wrote back in when was that, sir?
1987.
Okay. That was published in what journal?
Journal of Forensic Science.
Okay. Did that article have anything to do with how far back spatter can go out in an intraoral gunshot wound?
No.
Okay. In that article, sir, you indicated that back spatter missed droplets less than 1 millimeter can generally go back about 2 feet. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Were you meaning to suggest in any way that in an intraoral gunshot wound, back spatter can only go 2 feet?
No.
Why is that?
When you publish any scientific article, your conclusions need to be limited within your experimental model. In the experimental model of our particular article, we set up back spatter experiments that were on a flat surface. What we did is we took a sponge, we saturated it with blood, and we placed it inside a plastic bag and then attached it to foam board with a protective backing so we don't have bullets bouncing around. And then we placed the muzzle of the weapon close to it and discharged the weapon. And the gases as well as the bullet penetrate the bag, simulating an exposed shot like to someone's forehead or temple region, and create the gases enter the area. They create small droplets of blood. As the gases exit, they travel back towards the shooter. And in that experiment, you have a large volume area for the gases to dissipate. And so the initial momentum that is created by the gases dissipates fairly rapidly. And in my experience, within this experimental design, these droplets would, under 1 millimeter or less in size, would travel a couple of feet.
Okay. Why is then the experimental design or what you're trying to look for important when you're doing experiments or discussing how far back spatter can go?
Well, the one unique thing about crime scenes is you encounter lots of different circumstances. For example, you could have a crime scene the result of a shooting that's out of doors, and the wind could be blowing. Wind could carry these particulates farther than just the shooting itself might carry them once they're free flight within the atmosphere. So that's a circumstance that would not apply. Intraoral a gunshot wound, you have an enclosed cavity. It's like blowing up a balloon, and when you let go of the end of the balloon, the gas escapes through the area of least resistance, and there is more initial force applied to all of the particulates that are escaping.
Okay. In other words, would it be fair to say that the momentum can make back spatter travel further?
That potential is certainly possible, yes.
Okay. And in an intraoral wound, you said that gas escapes out of a cavity. What cavity would that be?
At the mouth, and then possibly the nose.
Okay. Where does the gas build up in the mouth?
Well, you have to understand the process, I guess, associated with what's going on here before.
Okay.
Before I could just give that a yes or no answer.
Why don't we talk about it a little bit? May I just have another picture, Mark, please?
The octuple V.
Octuple.
Sir, you've seen this picture before?
Yes.
Okay, and you actually watched the whole little video or MPEG that this picture was pulled from?
Yes.
And it's your understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that that's a gun, a revolver being fired?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what is that cloud that we see coming out in the front of the gun there?
That is what we'd refer to as expanding gases that would be coming out of the end of the barrel after the bullet.
Why is that important to understand how the gases expand?
The entire concept of discharging a firearm is based upon an explosion of solid propellants that occur within a cartridge case. These solid propellants are converted with a lot of heat to a gas. The gas expands, and the pressure of that expanding gas is what pushes a bullet out the barrel and gives its initial velocity as it exits the barrel. These gases are expanding as they're coming out because they are still hot. And as you can see in this photograph, the area where the gases are visible is larger than the actual bore diameter of the weapon. So it demonstrates that this expansion process in the photograph.
And does the fact that the pressure continues to expand have anything to do with the fact that the bullet does come out of the gun?
Yes, gunpowder is a chemical reaction that is not real quick. It's not like what you might find, for example, in a hand grenade. Gunpowder is designed to burn a little slower, and rifle powders burn a little slower actually than pistol powders. So you have this initial explosion that takes place. You have the continued burning of these powders as they're going down the barrel, and we have seen and demonstrated that there are partially burned gunpowder also exiting the bullet exiting the barrel after the bullet. So they are probably also burning in the atmosphere and causing expanding gases as well. What you end up with is what you see here, a cloud that is larger in diameter than the bore from which they exited.
Okay. And when you have this cloud and you call it an explosion, if that gun is inside someone's mouth in an intraoral wound, would that explosion be taking place inside the oral cavity?
Yes.
Okay. And why is that significant when discussing how far backspatter can go out in an intraoral wound?
Because the amount of space is limited. These pressures are present, and this gas is going to release through the area of least resistance, and that would be the mouth and possibly the nose. So they're going to exit that area, especially in a gunshot where you have no forward spatter. There's no, the bullet did not exit the other side and carry kinetic energy with it.
Okay. And does the kinetic energy have anything to do with how far the backspatter can go out?
The kinetic energy is the energy of what we call objects in motion, and it is the momentum of the bullet is generally what we talk about, the kinetic energy.
Right.
Kinetic energy is also applied to a gas, an expanding gas, and the particulates that are in that gas. They are going to give motion or action to objects.
Okay. Do they follow the path of the kinetic energy?
Yes.
Are they propelled by the kinetic energy?
Yes.
Okay. And why is the fact that they're propelled by the kinetic energy important?
These objects are created by the destruction that takes place by the bullet, expansion of the wound channel, liquids that are present, bits of tissue that are suspended will follow those gases as they are expelled.
Okay. And have you yourself done simple demonstrations, or could tell the jury about a simple demonstration that would explain that?
Yes, it's not hard to demonstrate. Prior to coming down here, I just set a paint can on a countertop with some butcher paper and just pressed the button on the paint can and held it down. Paint can operates under pressure and what we call the Venturi effect, and it creates little tiny droplets of paint that exit in a mist. In a stagnant air environment, I could get these droplets of paint to travel about 63 inches. I took a small fan and connected it to the tabletop next to the paint can, and then repeated the experiment by pushing down the top of the paint can and held it. And the small droplets, less than a millimeter in size, would travel out 94 inches. And that was basically the end of the length of my table.
Okay. And so the amount of momentum or explosive factor that propels the small particles out can affect how far back they're going to travel. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, your article, and it's been talked about in this courtroom a lot, mentions something called Stokes' Law. When you wrote that article, were you intending to say that this Stokes' Law limit in any way limited how far back spatter can go out in an intraoral wound when the gases are pushing the spatter backwards?
No.
Tell the jurors what that discussion about Stokes' Law in your article was about.
Like with any other science, most sciences begin through the process of observations of things that happen, and later on one thinks about these and tries to assign principles that might apply to why these observations occur. If you go to Yellowstone Park and watch Old Faithful, you might be awed by what happens. A geologist might look at this and say there must be some foundational principles by why Old Faithful spouts the way it does and at the intervals that it does. The same is true in our science. The science of bloodstain pattern analysis is based primarily on observations. And when I wrote this paper about 20 years ago, a group of us were trying to look at why this phenomena was occurring. Stokes' Law deals with the friction capability of viscous liquids. And Stokes' Law might be used to determine how much oil you might get through the Alaskan pipeline per unit time. Stokes also looked at spheres and had a calculation for determining the terminal velocity of a sphere falling through a medium based upon characteristics of the medium, the liquid medium, and characteristics of the sphere. This wasn't unlike what we were seeing. Our medium was actually air. We know that air has some density. We had an observation that larger particles seem to travel farther than smaller particles. So there were some factors of density and particle size. I threw this paragraph in there with some caveats. I start out with the word if certain things occur, then maybe this applies. As I look at it over the course of my career, it probably was the inappropriate application. Okay. It probably does not apply as much as we thought it did back then.
Okay. And so Stokes' Law, as you just testified, was for dropping droplets into a liquid going downward, correct?
Yeah, solids in a liquid, and if the particular object has a same density and was larger in diameter, the terminal velocity that it could reach in the liquid would be faster.
Little baby.
Were you trying to say that terminal velocity applies for things dropping downward into gravity, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you trying to say that Stokes' Law terminal velocity had anything to do with being propelled out this way in an intraoral wound?
No. Where we were looking at Stokes' Law is that if you take a drop of blood and drop it from a height above 3 feet onto like a glass plate, all the droplets are going to be the same size because that blood will reach a terminal velocity as it falls towards that glass plate. How this applies was that, again, we were seeing a circumstance of small droplets not going very far, larger droplets were carrying further. The diameter of the droplet, the mass of that droplet had an effect on its terminal velocity. We were thinking maybe it has an effect in its initial velocity. As I look at it now, this is probably much simpler than that.
And why do you say that?
Because you have gas, you have an explosion, you have a presence of gas that develops an initial velocity on these particulates. It's not much different than the bullet that goes down the barrel. And then from the time that it leaves and these gases expand, it probably loses velocity because some larger droplets have greater mass, they carry her farther than and are less susceptible to air resistance, probably travel further than the smaller droplets.
Does the fact that this is an intraoral wound with the gas as propellant also indicate that Stokes' law is inapplicable to you?
Probably not. Probably does not apply. We have yet to come up with any formula that would say that a certain size droplet will travel an expected distance. It's still a business of observations.
Okay. And therefore, would I be correct in asking you whether there's general accepted agreement in the scientific community that blood spatter can only go out 3 feet?
No, it just depends on the circumstance.
Okay. So general agreement in the scientific community that small blood spatter or large blood spatter go out 3 feet?
No.
Okay. And in the circumstance of an intraoral wound that you talk about, the explosion in the mouth, as we had in this particular case, does something called Boyle's law apply?
Yes and no. Yeah, it does.
Tell the jury what Boyle's law is, because they've heard a little bit about it in the past, but tell them what your interpretation is in terms of with blood spatter.
When dealing with gases, there are a number of different laws that have come along, primarily during the 1800s. There's what we call the ideal gas laws. They all deal with certain parameters. When you have a fixed amount of gas, that its volume is going to be related to the amount of pressure applied to it and a constant, which is temperature. Boyle's law is one of several gas laws. I have to refer to my notes to give you a specific definition. It says for a fixed mass or amount of gas at a fixed temperature, the pressure and the volume would be constant. In our circumstance, we have an explosion that's taking place. We don't have a constant. We don't have an enclosed environment where we could measure pressure or where we can measure volume. It's something that occurs very quickly, and then it's gone.
Okay. And with regard to an intraoral wound,
I need to interrupt you briefly. We need to do something outside the presence of the jury, just momentarily. Ladies and gentlemen,
thanks.
keep in mind the admonition. Would you step into the jury room? I'll try to make it as brief as possible.
What? Judge Dowhard's got something to say, and he's going to say it right the fuck now. Y'all heard?
The
One more time. Let's go.
jurors and the alternates have
Judge
left.
Dowhard,
Mr. Weiss, you want to bring your
drop the
client
hammer
forward?
on somebody. Sit down. Sit down.
Good morning, Mr. Weiss.
Oh, okay. Running in here.
I'm prepared to make the order I told you about yesterday. Do you wish to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Just briefly, Your Honor, it's my understanding of the defense that at this point that she is not going to be called as a witness, that the court has made a finding that her testimony is irrelevant, and based on that, I would ask the court not to put any type of gag order at this time. I don't see any reason for it. In addition, as far as her ability to earn a living, it deals with talking to the press every day. She's got a book out, she's got a book coming
Somebody
out
did
very
color balance or something, like white balance or something on these feeds.
shortly, and she
No one's hair is that
basically
yellow.
primarily is focused in on and talking about her, promoting her books. She's not interested in promoting anything that goes on in this trial whatsoever. So, I mean, to limit her from talking to the press would prohibit her from earning a living here. And that's part of her way she earns a living, is writing books and selling them. So, based on that, and I don't know what the defense position is at this point, but it's my understanding that they weren't planning, once the court made its ruling, they weren't planning to call her as a witness at this point. So, based on that, I would ask the court not to put any type of a order on her or prohibit her from talking about the case, or especially talking about her books and her life in general. That's part of her livelihood, that's part of her life, and that's how she survives.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosen?
Their hair matches the fucking yellow paper here.
It's very brief. Given the court's prior indications and rulings in this matter, we did not intend to call her as a witness at this point.
So you're basically, let me clarify the parts of the ruling I haven't talked about. It was based upon that Mr. Spector took the stand that depending upon his testimony, then her testimony might become relevant. Without his testimony, it's irrelevant. That's the bottom line. It has nothing to do with this case because there's nothing to link Ms. Gibson's proposed testimony with the facts of this case as they exist at the present time. Are you saying that Mr. Spector is not going to testify?
I'm not prepared to make that statement at this point, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you want to be heard, Mr. Bruno?
May I,
Certainly.
Of course. You're in Judge Howard's room.
Your Honor, there is one point that
Fair-
the team
fair
feels
shake,
very
sir.
strongly about, and that is
Certainly.
this. As the court knows, we have indicated previously that we believe that while the universe of her testimony may be viewed the way the court does and the way the prosecution does, we have presented previously parts of that proposed testimony that we think are relevant, whether Mr. Spector testifies or he doesn't testify. And I know the court has ruled and indicated previously that the court does not agree with the defense in that respect, but I think it is important to protect the record, to stick on it the fact that we do believe in those limited areas that we've discussed previously, whether Mr. Spector ever hits the witness stand or doesn't hit the witness stand, that particular portion of Ms. Gibson's testimony bears relevancy to the issues in this case that's been presented thus far and will be continue to be presented.
That's fine, but that has nothing to do with the point I'm making here. I understand what you're saying, but that has nothing to do with my rulings. Prosecution wish to be heard?
Your Honor.
Okay. Well, it's very simple. I don't care whether Ms. Gibson promotes her book, but she's not going to do it by bringing Ms. Clarkson into it. That's real simple. As long as this trial is in existence, if you go out and promote your book and you mention Lana Clarkson in any way, shape, fashion, or form, while this
Listen to this thread.
case is ongoing, I am ordering you not to do that. It is inappropriate. You are a potential witness in this case, despite the comments that were just made. All witnesses are ordered not to talk to the media, especially because your testimony at this point is
Howard's letting
inadmissible.
her know.
It would be nothing but an attempt, in my view, to influence the jury, even though they're under an order not to read articles. The possibility exists that they do. So if you want to sell your book about your life, that's fine, but you're not going to mention Lana Clarkson. And if you do, you will be in violation of my order, and I will hold you in contempt. It's that simple. Do you understand?
I understand, Your Honor. My objective is never to disrespect the court, ever.
Okay.
And I was just under the assumption that I was completely excused, according to you and according to Mr. Rose.
And that could be
I'd like to make that clear to you.
And that's fine, and I don't have a
Okay.
problem with that. I'm saying now this is what the facts are.
Okay.
And you may promote your book. I have no interest in whether you do or you don't, only to the fact that it may affect, to the extent that it may affect this trial, and that means you may not in any way, shape, form, touch upon, come close to, or talk about Lana Clarkson
I
or
understand.
anything dealing with the Phil Spector case. Other than that, you're free to talk about what you want.
Gagged on
May I
that
ask a
Spector
question?
case,
Yes.
period.
If she had asked the question and the book, her diaries are presented to her, and Ms. Clarkson's name is pointed out,
She can't talk about it.
She can't say
She
that.
tells the interviewer, I'm
Is
sorry.
it that hard to understand? He made it pretty damn clear, and he's pretty damn nice. What he's being very stern.
I am forbidden while the trial, Mr. Spector's trial is ongoing, to discuss it. I'm very sorry. I can't do it. I'd like to, but I can't. Simple. Okay? Anything else?
We have just a moment.
Certainly.
Yo, Pammy, $4.99 for your
One issue
beard
I'd like some
bleach
guidance
kit.
on.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, Pammy. Get you on this new wheel.
Mr.
Thank
Reese
you,
just
baby.
brought up if she's giving an interview and is asked about a particular book or an entry in the book, it is our belief, based on information that we have, based on the preliminary investigation that we've done, that any entries concerning Lana Clarkson in Ms. Gibson's book have patently been doctored. The forgeries. I would ask that the court's order extend to any interviews that she give surrounding that particular book.
I said anything to do with this trial or Lana Clarkson.
If, in
Therefore, it's
fact-
covered.
If in fact Ms. Gibson is asked
not
by an
absolutely
interviewer, can we see your book? And that book opens up to that page, that would be inappropriate. I don't think.
Oh,
Ms.
I
Gibson
agree.
should be able to-
That's part of, if
But
she
he
tries
talks
to do,
to
and
them
I'm
like
not
they're
suggesting that you would, if you
people.
try to do something like that,
May I say something, Your Honor?
certainly.
Those
Right here.
documents,
She says, may I say something? He's like, of course.
my black book has been in chain of custody since 1999, so this allegation is really insulting the people and the chain of custody and the sense of scrutiny that the criminal evidence room maintains over its chain of custody.
Well, I'll leave that for others. I've been given a lot of information which is contained in my ruling that I made that is sealed, which will remain sealed. I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment at this time. I've allowed you to make your statement. You've made your statement, and that's my ruling. So in the answer to your question, it would be covered. Mr. Weiss?
I just don't think it's appropriate for the people to accuse those books of being
You can-
doctored. That's
Weeks?
that's slanderous towards my client, and I feel it's totally inappropriate here.
You can handle that somewhere else. I'm only concerned about the sanctity of my trial. And that's what I'm concerned about. That's the limited order I've made. Everybody seems to be on board with that. Thank you for coming down. I appreciate it. I hope it's clarified. All right?
Thank you, Alex.
Okay.
Go to the next one. I guess we're still going to keep with this.
And if the witness will retake the stand, and we'll call the jurors out. Oh, okay. As soon as the jurors are ready. Well, no, the reporter needs a recess. You know what? If we hear the jurors, we can hear the restroom doors closing. Why don't we take about another 5 minutes, give the reporter a chance to take a break, and then that'll be it for the morning.
Cards like listen. Yeah, okay, part 2. We got another hour here with James Pex. Probably take us through the rest of Murder Church. Let's spin a wheel this morning, shall we? Everybody in here right now, appreciate it. Thank you all so much. Yeah. If any didn't see the Brian Koberger show yesterday with Hello from Excited Utterance, please go check that out. It was a good one. I thought we had a pretty good discussion. Again, I'm trying to figure out a lot of stuff within that case. I'm jumping back into it. It's a very contentious case. It's something that I left a long time ago because of a lot of the contentious issues, but it's one that I am very interested in and I'm going to cover. So I'm going to keep on top of that. Tonight, again, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Lauren Conlon, a legit investigative reporter, is coming on here, talking Jeffrey Epstein crimes. It's going to be an interesting one, I do believe. I've always been intrigued by that madness. 3:45 p.m. Eastern Time today on the Wrestling Channel, Wrestle Plunge. New video drops. It's about 6 minutes long. It's not very long. Insane Andre the Giant story that you're not going to believe. It's pretty dark. Yeah, we're still rocking and rolling. Let's spin a wheel here. I don't know if you know this or not, but I work out here. I work in these streets, son. I'm out here working. I take about 3 weeks on every one of those videos. All right. Let's do it. Good luck, everyone. Ooh, shit. Oh, shit. Good luck. That's a damn good spin. Damn, who is that? I think it's Cammy. Cammy! I don't know if she's in here, man. Cammy's been a G for a long time, dude. Cammy's been with me for quite some time. She's incredible. Always being supportive, always gifting out memberships. One of the coolest Buzz Nation G's that you're going to find. Cammy, congratulations. I will get with Cammy and let her know the next time she slips through here. I'm going to put her in the winner circle. Again, thanks everyone for hanging out this morning. Let me get her down here. I got to start getting my shipping going on here. Again, Cammy. Let's see. Magnet. I'm going to put magnet and stickers. Hell yeah. Nice. Congrats everybody that's in the winner circle as well. Cammy, yeah. Cammy's always coming through here. I don't know if she's won before, man. She deserves it. Cammy rules, dude. Let me get my green screen back here. Boom, Murder Church. All right, let's keep rocking and rolling, folks. Another hour.
All parties, jurors, alternates to the witness are present as heretofore. You may resume.
Just back up one couple questions. Text. The bullet, when it comes out of the barrel, is that being propelled by energy?
Yes.
And about how fast does the bullet come out of a
Thanks,
barrel
everyone,
in a
for
gun
hanging out.
such as a .38 caliber?
Donate and being so fucking
Somewhere, depending upon the type of cartridges they use, between 700 and 1,000 feet per second.
A lot of energy takes a lot of energy to
Yeah,
do
you
that.
have to get from 0 to that velocity in a matter of a few inches.
Still got this crazy
Okay.
blade.
And
I
so
pulled
with
this out
that
yesterday.
energy, we left off, we were starting to discuss something called Boyle's Law, and you explained it to the jury as best as we can all understand it. And is that applicable when you have this intraoral wound?
And it has some basics that apply, yes.
Tell us where it's
a cool
applicable and why it also may not be applicable.
Sure. Boyle's Law deals, as I indicated, and I'll repeat what it means. It's for a fixed volume or a fixed mass amount of gas
Open boxes.
at a fixed temperature. The pressure and the volume is a constant.
Hey, morning.
To be able to evaluate the pressure, this would have to be within a closed container. in an explosion, you have the generation of heat. And you have some maximum heat that occurs, which means that under Boyle's law, there's going to be an expansion of these gases and an increase in pressure. It's this increase in pressure and the expansion of gases, the volume, that pushes the bullet out the barrel. And so it applies from that standpoint. Their pressure and temperature increase the volume, which applies to another law called Charles' law.
Okay. Now, when you have that explosion inside the mouth, an inch-oral wound, I explained this story like chipmunk cheeks. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what does the fact that the gases are coming out of the mouth mean in terms of whether or not they're constant?
The problem is that these gases that are exiting the mouth are now coming in contact with an open environment, and they're going to reach some point of equilibrium with that open environment. At some point, force is going to be zero. And the broader the exposure, and the broader the exposure to the atmosphere, the sooner that that's going to happen. A simple analogy is blowing out a candle. If you purse your lips, you can blow out a candle at a greater distance than if you tried to blow out a candle with your mouth wide open.
And does that cause then the particulates that are taken out in this explosion to go further?
Yes.
And do they dissipate equally then all around, or do they go any which way?
Well, they would travel in the direction of force and the movement of these expanding gases until the issue of the gases is resolved and gone.
Okay. Now, when you have the expanding gases in the mouth coming out of the mouth, does that in any way affect the size of the particulates?
No, that's an interesting question. I don't think it's been really resolved by at least any physics principles that I'm aware of. Is the amount of energy required to come up with a particular droplet size. We know that if you just take a drop of blood from a dropper and just drop it to the floor, what we refer to as passive blood droplets, the only effect is the weight of the droplet and gravity, that they're all going to be about the same size. As you apply more energy, for example, if there was some liquid blood on this tabletop and I hit it with my hand, the droplets would be smaller because I'm applying more energy into that liquid surface. When you deal with applying energies as great as would occur with a firearm, then you get very small droplets that we're talking about in a millimeter sort of size. Where it gets complex is that sometimes you have a circumstance where a person is bleeding and just dripping blood into liquid blood, and you can also get very small droplets in that. So how do you apply a constant physical principle to that?
Okay. Now, when you talked about the energy that goes into an intraoral wound, can you tell the jurors why that's different from something, for instance, a head wound with a gun, interpreting blood spatter?
In the article that I published, we were basically attempting to duplicate a surface that where the blood is right on the surface, for example, in an external head wound shot. You have a shallow cavity in which these gases are going to go into. You're going to strike bone very quickly. There's going to be expansion of these gases under the skin, which isn't very deep, and then they're going to come back towards the shooter, and as they affect the atmosphere, you basically, if you have a vertical surface there, you have a 180-degree environment for these gases to expand until such time they reach equilibrium with the atmosphere.
Why is the fact in that type of wound where you have a 180-degree area for them to expand different than an intraoral wound?
An intraoral wound would be more of a deeper cavity. It'd be a more focused return of these suspended droplets. They would have more initial velocity or initial energy behind them. which might transport them farther.
Now, in your article, you also had some pictures of what back spatter may look on a shooter's sleeve, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Jen, could we have, and Judge, we'll need this marked cuff.
This would be octuple W.
I have a copy up here, Mr. Pex, in case you can't see that. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Is this a true copy of the picture that is in your article?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you discussed your observations in terms of back spatter on a shooter's arm in that article, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what is it that we are looking at up here?
What you're looking at is my hand and the lab coat that I was wearing at the time that I was conducting some back spatter experiments with a weapon.
Okay. And what purpose were you doing that for?
What we were demonstrating there is the small droplets of blood that land on the sleeve of my lab coat.
Okay. And why were you demonstrating that?
Had some cases that we had this where I observed these small droplets on the sleeve of an accused, and it was
Bless you.
important to know whether or not how this might have occurred. And so we did these experiments to attempt to reconstruct this particular shooting scenario as we knew it, and is it possible that these droplets could have got there by the process of what we refer to as back spatter.
And when you were looking at these experiments, you're looking to see, correct me if I'm wrong, whether or not what the distribution and location of spatter would be on somebody who was a shooter.
Yes.
Okay. And, sir, if I, may I approach, Your Honor?
Oh, yes.
If I came up to you, excuse me, I'll pull my back, that's a little slow. If I came up to you and I was on equal level with you, which I'm not, and I'm still not, but and I put a gun into your mouth, you turned to this way,
Okay.
and I put a gun into your mouth and shot you, where would you expect to find back spatter?
On the exposed area, if you don't mind remaining here.
You may have to help me back up.
Okay.
Oh, it's getting old, this tough.
All right.
You two want a moment together, or?
Oh, shit! Son of a bitch, what's happening? Oh, my God. What? Son of a bitch, Judge Dowhart is the best judge out here. Come on now, that was amazing. Huh? Damn. Y'all might need a room. Judge Dowhart will pay for it now.
Had several moments together already.
Whoa, shit! What the fuck? He even came back with a good retort. Whoa.
Okay, I'm getting a little closer. It's awful
right.
different view up here, Judge.
What is happening right now?
If your hand is turned, for example, like this, your wrist is bent, then the exodus of the fine particulates would be on the weapon.
That was hilarious.
And they would land on the inner surface of your sleeve here, okay? If your hand was pointed down like this, then this area of the hand would be
Yeah, I've been
protected.
following her. She
You
followed me
would
back
see
on
more
that.
of them perhaps in this area.
What about the inner portion of my, I'm not wearing a,
Right.
yeah.
She's my
If
favorite.
you're, like I said, if your
attorney.
hand is bent at the wrist like this, then I would expect that you would see something here.
Okay. And if you're facing me and I have my hand, my arm in front of you, and your head slightly turned, where would you expect to find
The
it?
projection of materials from my mouth would be within the scope or a cone in the direction that my head is facing.
Okay. Excuse me, but I may have to use your hand to get down.
Oh, my God.
Would that be true of all particulates?
Judge Dowhart wanted to so hard say something else. He looked right at it. He's like, I better not.
I would presume,
Better not.
yes.
Professionalism, baby. Bring it
Hypothetically,
together.
if there is no spatter on a right arm of a person who allegedly shot a gun in an intraoral wound such as I just demonstrated, would that be consistent
Les,
with
thanks
the
for hanging
person
out.
being the shooter if there's no spatter?
It would be inconsistent.
If there is a blood spatter on someone's arm under the upper right sleeve under here, would that be consistent or inconsistent?
Well, remember, these things don't go around corners and they don't curve, so that would have to be an exposed area if that indeed is a blood spatter droplet.
And exposed area, I see you had your hand up like mine, my arm's bent. The arm would have to be exposed like this?
In some manner like that.
Okay. Not like this down where I'm doing it right here.
Correct.
Now, you also discussed in that article identification of blood spatter, did you not? Or identification of blood?
Yes.
Okay. And you have been a serologist and you have looked under blood under a microscope in the
Yes.
past. Can you see blood and identify it as blood under a stereo microscope?
As you look at small stains like this under a microscope, it is certainly a presumptive test that might be blood. At this point, you need to go on to do further tests to confirm that it is indeed blood.
Okay. And in fact, did you have another picture in that same article concerning a stereo microscope photomicrograph of what may be seen or may not be seen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'll check that
And
out.
Jennifer, Your Honor, I will need this marked microblood.
This would be octuple X.
Where do we go next? What's after all?
And if we could highlight that portion up there, Jennifer. What is the magnification level that you were discussing in your article as to whether or not blood could be identified under a microscope?
This particular photograph is at 130 times.
Okay. And are we looking at any nuclei or anything that identifies this as blood?
No, what you're looking at is a particulate that later is tested and is found to indeed be blood. The magnification is such that up in the upper corner at about 11 o'clock, there is a groove that is taking this from a fiber. And that's looking at a piece of fiber on a cloth, that's how much it is magnified. This is a droplet of this size contain hundreds of thousands of individual red cells.
Okay. And can you see any red cell of blood under a stereo microscope at a 63 magnification?
Not in a dried blood stain.
Okay. Do you know of any procedure in any ASCLAD lab that you've either run, audited, or
It's not
reviewed the
ASCLAD,
procedures
right?
for where there was an approved ASCLAD procedure
ASCLAD?
for identifying blood under a microscope, under a stereo microscope at a 63-degree magnification?
No, it's certainly the purpose of a microscopic exam is to locate an area. In your opinion, you formulate an opinion that is maybe.
Is it the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors? Escalade? I think that's what.
Consistent with blood,
lines up.
but if you're going to prove that it's
That's what I found when I
blood, you're going to have to
Googled
carry
Asclad.
on and demonstrate that by some other means.
When ASCLAD, when you were doing it in 2002, when ASCLAD certifies a procedure in a lab, did a procedure have to be written?
Yes.
And did it also have to have a validation study in any way attached to it?
Yes, if you wanted to come up with a new method, for example, for the identification of blood, you would have to go through a validation process.
What does that mean?
That means that your procedure would have to be scrutinized by others in your profession and also scrutinized from a standpoint of running a number of unknown samples to see whether or not it stands up to the test and is capable of identifying whatever you're attempting to identify compared to other things. Like we were going to identify blood, could you have some lumps of ketchup that you could differentiate from blood?
Okay. And when you reviewed the manual of the LASD, did you see any written procedure approved by ASCLAD to identify blood under a microscope at a 63-degree magnification?
No.
And as you sit here today, do you know of any lab that has any such approved ASCLD procedure?
No.
Have you ever heard of it before?
No, I've been looking at blood for 40 years. I know how to do it and what is acceptable and what is not.
Okay. And when you identify blood, do you have to put it through a confirmatory procedure?
Yes.
And what are some of the confirmatory procedures that are approved in your area?
One of the earliest techniques was the formation of a crystal from blood. The name of the test was Takayama's. You would ask that. T-A-K-A Yama.
Okay, was there any
Close
other?
enough? Okay.
Was there any other procedures?
There are tests, immunoprecipitin techniques that identify a stain as being human blood. There are what are called hemotrace tests that will identify human blood. And the process of DNA in itself, if you are successful in performing DNA, will identify something as human blood.
Okay. And does the recoil of a gun have anything to do with how any particulates come out of an intraoral wound, for instance?
Have a good day, Jim. Thank you for hanging out this morning.
Let's back up for a minute when we talk about a
Come back
weapon
tonight.
and its recoil.
Well, let me explain. What do you mean by recoil? That's probably should have been my first starting point.
Okay. When you discharge a weapon, there actually is a primary and a secondary recoil. The first recoil is that of getting a mass in motion, which is a bullet, and getting it out the end of the barrel. There is a secondary recoil that is created by the gases that exit the end of the barrel. They have a force back towards the barrel as well. And in some weapons, you can poke holes in the end of the barrel and divert these gases to the side to reduce the recoil. If you were able to continue solid propellant generation of these gases, you would have the principle of a rocket. That's how a rocket flies. So as these gases exit the barrel, there is a push back towards the weapon as well from the force of the gases.
Okay. And when you say from the force of the gases, then, correct me if I'm wrong, then the way the recoil goes out from the force of the gases is the way the gun's going to go out?
Yes.
And would it follow then that, for instance, hypothetically, if the gun sight caught on caps in the front of someone's mouth, those caps would go out in direction of the way the gun was shot?
Well, they go out in the direction that the weapon recoiled.
Direction recoiled. And what direction does the recoil go out
It
in?
would be back towards the shooter.
Okay, so ultimately, where hypothetically, if caps came out of a mouth, the caps would go back in the direction of the shooter, ultimately.
It did depend upon the orientation.
And when you talk about then, back to the gun, when somebody holds a gun and you have ballistics training in this, and assuming it is a shot in someone's mouth and holding the gun, would you expect to find backspatter? And Jen, could you put up T8 again? Would you expect to find backspatter on the handle of a gun?
You would expect to find it in places that would not be covered by the hand.
Okay. And if, have you, when you are yourself, when you've shot a gun, have you always held the grip of a gun?
Yeah.
And if there was a hand holding the grip of the gun, would you expect to find backspatter?
Not normally, unless it, for some reason, was able to go between the fingers, but the fingers themselves would block that stuff from coming back and landing on the grip.
In your training to police officers and your history in the Oregon State Police and ballistics, have you ever heard of something called a snap fire?
Yes.
What is that?
Especially in some older revolvers, weapons that have a hammer, it was possible to pull a hammer back a part way and release it. And it would have enough momentum to force the firing pin into the primer and discharge a cartridge accidentally.
Okay, and that's called an accidental shooting?
Well, normally it's accidental. It's
Okay.
called a snap fire.
Called the snap fire. And does a snap fire have any effect on blood spatter?
No, it's still the discharge of a weapon.
Okay. And by the way, in your career dealing with intraoral wounds, have you ever had any intraoral wound investigations?
I can only think of one or two in the course of my career.
Okay, and what were the circumstances involving them?
One that I recall was an older couple, and there were issues, medical issues, and it was basically a homicide-suicide, and the older gentleman shot his wife first and then shot himself.
And who was the intraoral wound?
The older gentleman.
The one who first killed his wife and then
Yes.
shot himself?
Yes.
In your experience dealing with blood spatter, do blood spatter experts generally get involved in interpretation and pattern analysis in intraoral wounds?
Yes and no.
Tell us what you mean.
It depends on the circumstances. When you go to a crime scene, you document through photography and through your notes what you see. You focus then your orientation upon what you feel is important at the time. And in a circumstance like this, once it's determined that it's a homicide-suicide, then the investigation is pretty much over from a crime scene standpoint.
Okay. And is it good practice to assume that everything is a crime scene as opposed to a death scene?
That everything is a crime scene if there is a potential crime involved.
Okay. And would that be good practice?
Yes, that's the way that I taught it.
That's the way you taught it. Okay. And when you also taught, did you teach about how you should think about scenes and whether you get, after you get additional evidence such as blood spatter, interpretations in to police?
In the reasoning that you,
Yes.
the mental processes, those begin at the crime scene. And what I think where Ms. Bodden is going is when you conduct any type of an investigation, there are some thought processes involved. Sometimes one uses deductive reasoning and...
What is that?
Deductive reasoning is a process where you formulate a hypothetical and then you look for those evidence that supports that particular hypothetical. And it's common in law enforcement. It's efficient and effective. I gave you an example. You're in a patrol car and someone tells you that there's been a bank robbery and that the suspect is wearing a red shirt and has on blue jeans, and you're traveling to the robbery and you see someone that matches that description. You have information that fits your scenario. You have probable cause to stop and investigate this particular individual further. In the scientific inquiry, the process is a little different. It's a matter of...
Can I just stop you for a second? You said that was deductive reasoning or was police inquiry reasoning?
Yes, it's not all police, but it's common in law enforcement.
And what in the scientific community, what are the processes when you evaluate things such as blood spatter?
In the scientific community, we use a process called inductive reasoning. This is first proposed by Francis Bacon in the 1600s. And it's a process where you have to first evaluate all of your data first. And then from looking at all of your data and looking at patterns and information within it, then you formulate a hypothesis at that point.
Okay. And what is the actual difference in terms of when you're using deductive versus inductive reasoning on a day-to-day basis?
Deductive reasoning, you look for facts that support your hypothesis. In inductive reasoning, you look at all of the facts, and out of the facts, you formulate a hypothesis.
Okay. And the scientific method looks at all the facts and formulates the hypothesis, correct?
It should.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Prosecutor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, AJ is coming up.
Good morning, Mr. Price.
Good morning, Mr. Jackson.
You started out by, and I'll apologize in advance if I jump around a little bit. I'm going to try to keep this to somewhat of a minimum. I'm going to try to follow some of the points that Ms. Kinney Bodden made. So if I hop around, I'll try to give you a guidepost before I do it. The first thing I'd like to chat with you about for just a second is the subject of luminol. Ms. Kinney Bodden asked you several questions concerning the procedures and your review of the procedural manual at the LASD, the Sheriff's Crime Lab.
Yes.
And you said you did review those procedures, and it's an ASCLD lab certified laboratory, correct?
Yes.
You had no issue or quarrel with the procedures that are in place there, correct?
No.
All right. And as a matter of fact, you even reviewed the testimony of Mr. Renteria, Steve Renteria.
At one point I did, yes.
Okay. I assume that you had no quarrel with the procedures that he engaged in. In other words, he conducted the luminol procedurally correctly, in your opinion?
Based upon the information was provided, yes.
Okay. You're indicating that, and I read some of your work that you've published about luminol. I want to make sure that I understand what you're talking about when you say that it can give you a false pattern of spatter when you use luminol in some circumstances.
Yes.
Is what you're indicating, use this, very visual, so I'll use some show and tell if you don't mind. Say I have a blood stain, a sponge, and I spread it on this pad, just a swipe, okay? So we know that it's pig's blood for our experiment or something like that. And I go ahead and let this dry a little bit, and I set it over here. We darken the room. Well, I guess I'd need to spray it first. I walk over with luminol to test it, and I give it one squirt out of a aerosol-type, whatever it is, device, a squirt bottle of some kind. Now we darken the room. You're explaining to the jurors that because the aerosol comes out in a spatter itself, that if I just utilize this pattern for my determination of what's on the page, I could falsely assume that there is a spatter pattern on there as opposed to a swipe, because what's luminescing are the little drops that are coming out of the aerosol can, if you will, or the spray bottle onto the pad. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, your conclusion's correct. Your procedure is incorrect.
Okay, what would be the correct procedure?
The correct procedure would be first to darken the room completely to the point that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face.
Okay.
And your eyes would dilate. You'd be able to see very low levels of light.
I see.
At that point, then you would spray your tablet and see small droplets of luminescence at that point.
Okay. Now let me change that just a little bit, and let's say in our experiment with pig's blood. The pig's blood, by the way, nothing against pigs. That's what's used in scientific experiments, correct? As opposed to human blood normally.
Depends. I oftentimes use my own blood.
Okay. You're tougher than I am. All right, now let's lay this down, this same pad down,
Oh, is it
and
bad? I haven't
we'll
watched
use
it
pig's
yet.
blood for this experiment, for our hypothetical,
Seems like
and
it could
say
be a long one. I'm not set up for anything.
we take a sponge,
Already in a long one.
and let's use a mousetrap, commonly used for high-velocity blood spatter, either forward spatter or back spatter. And we snap the mousetrap
You
and go
woke
ahead and
everybody
get some blood on this for our experiment. If the procedure is done correctly, and now we darken the room and our eyes dilate, and I can't see the hand in front of my face, and I've got luminol in front of me. If I use a power sprayer and I spray over it once, and then again, and again, and again, in a sweeping motion, to make sure I cover the area of the pad completely, would you expect, in your experience, that the spatter from the pig's blood, the sponge experiment, that would luminesce on this pad?
Well, yes, that's not normally what we call a high-velocity pattern using a mousetrap.
Okay, well, let's say a gunshot.
Yeah, I would expect that it would luminesce. Luminol is very good for larger stains like transfer patterns. A mousetrap will create some large droplets of blood that you might be able to effectively use or visualize and then subsequently test by some other means.
Okay, now let's, I'll go ahead and change that to a more comfortable experiment
There
that
we
is
go.
in.
Lumpy coming in here, going to get on the wheel. Cream Puff getting that thing. Let's go. I'm a bad, bad man. Hell yeah. Lumpy, gonna get on that thing. Lumpy. Cream Puff, go check out the video section. Got some cool stuff in there.
In fact, in your opinion, I think high velocity back spatter. And let's use a gunshot. And let's change this experiment. Now I've got this board and I set it up vertically. And I fire a gun at a sponge. And we're looking at back spatter, okay? The very small 1 millimeter and sub-millimeter particulate matter that comes backward, okay? And we can see visually, because this is either a yellow or a white board, and we can see there's a minimal amount of back spatter, droplet pattern on this, okay? Now I take that board and I do the same luminol experiment. And instead of just squirting it once, I use a power sprayer and I spray across and swipe back and forth, and I make sure I cover that board completely. Would you expect those 1 millimeter sized particulate matter to luminesce? In other words, is luminol sensitive enough to actually luminesce those tiny little 1 millimeter size particles?
There are several caveats to the experiment that you're describing.
Okay.
First of all, you're saying that you already see them on your paper. You know that they're there.
Correct.
Okay?
For my experiment, in other words, we know that there is spatter on there. Would you expect it to luminesce?
The second issue is you're now applying a liquid to a substance that's dissolvable in a liquid, which is the blood. Your small droplets may dissolve in your luminol. And those small droplets, you may not be able to see them unless you get your nose really close to them. Because oftentimes, if you're looking at millimeter size and smaller, you may not even see them on a wall such as this unless you get very close and get a magnifying glass.
Okay. In this darkened room, the whole point of luminol is that it luminesces. There's a light, if you will, that our human eyes can see, at that wavelength that we can see when the iron in the blood connects chemically with the chemicals in the luminol, correct?
Yes.
All right. The whole point is to luminesce or illuminate
Yes.
the iron in the blood, correct?
Right.
All right. So if I can see, for instance, a 1 millimeter sized particle, if I just take a pencil and I just made a little dot on this pad. May I approach?
Yes.
It's a little bit far. Just made a little dot with my pencil on this pad. Right? You can see that little dot where my finger is?
Yes.
All right. Assume that that's about 0.5 millimeter, because my pencil lead, I think, says 0.5 millimeters. Assume that that's 0.5 millimeter. If I can see that dot from here in dark lead, in normal light, certainly under completely black conditions, in other words, unlighted conditions, if that dot were luminescing, that would be even brighter or more easily seen than the dot on the paper as it stands right now. That's sort of the whole point of luminol, correct?
Yes and no. Again, there are some caveats. I understand what you're trying to say and where you're going with this, but there are a couple of factors that have to be considered. Number one, the degree of any chemical reaction relates to the amount of substrate that you have to react. So the amount of light that's going to emit from this little stain of blood depends on how much substrate you have to react with. The second thing is whether or not you are close enough to see it with your eyes at the distance from which you are spraying this luminol.
Okay.
Because the amount of light that may be generated from a droplet of that size is so slight, you may not be able to see it.
All right. You reviewed Steve Renteria's, well, let me back up before I ask that. What you're saying, and it makes some common sense, is that, for instance, a particulate matter, let's say luminescing that size, that's just a single drop in a room, if I'm walking through a dark room and that happens to be luminescing, you're saying I could walk by and easily miss that, not see it.
That's correct.
Okay. You reviewed Mr. Renteria's notes and reports concerning his procedures as far as the luminol is concerned at the crime scene, correct?
I don't have independent recollection. I know that I looked at them. If there's something specific,
Okay.
Perhaps you bring that forward, we could talk about it.
Sure. Actually, this is general. It's in your mind. What I was asking is, you're aware that Mr. Renteria is actually a very experienced criminalist. In other words, he's not a rookie on the job. This was not his first crime scene. You were aware of that.
I don't know anything about his work history.
Okay. Did you read his testimony?
Some of it, yes.
Okay. From his testimony, did you glean that he is an extraordinarily experienced criminalist who has done many, many, many crime scenes? I mean, that was in the testimony. You probably
It was
read
in
that.
testimony they've done several crime scenes.
Okay. And he is familiar with the luminol procedures at the LASD crime lab?
If he was using it, that would be a reasonable assumption.
And the LASD crime lab is a ASCLD certified crime lab.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, the LASD crime lab, unlike, for instance, the Oregon crime lab that you talked about having 5 to 10 people, actually employs dozens and dozens of people, maybe in the hundreds of people at the LASD crime lab. You're aware of that?
Yes.
Okay, you're aware that it's the second largest crime lab in the country, next only to the FBI crime lab.
I'm not aware of that, but that's fine.
Wouldn't surprise you.
No.
I mean, we live in a pretty big county, correct?
The rules and regulations under ASCLD apply the same no matter how large the laboratory.
Sure, I understand. But what I'm saying is this crime lab is very, very large.
Okay.
Yes?
Okay.
Okay. Steve Renteria, if you read his testimony, indicated that he is actually certified and has passed all the certifications required, both under the LASD crime lab procedures internally, as well as the ASCLD national and global procedures under their auditing system.
Okay.
Okay. You're aware of that, yes?
No, but I'll take your word for it.
Okay. Assume for purposes of our questioning that Steve Renteria is, in fact, all of those things, that he's certified, he's extremely experienced, and he has testified that he's been to many, many crime labs. He's used luminol many, many, many times. He actually was the one who mixed the luminol and ensured that the pH balances were correct, etc. You're also aware from his testimony that when he luminoled the area in front of Miss Clarkson, all the way over from the chair in which she was seated, okay, or where she was found, all the way over to the dark paneled wall, and that's the first area that he luminoled. You're aware of that, correct?
Okay.
Are you or are you not?
I'm not. No.
Okay. Assume for purposes of our questioning that that's the area that he first began luminol.
Okay.
You would expect as a criminalist that well, let me ask it this way. You're aware that he was actually specifically looking to identify tiny millimeter size or even sub-millimeter size blood particles on the floor. You're aware that he was specifically looking for that, correct?
Then I would find that an inappropriate application of the technique.
Okay, that having been your opinion,
That's right.
You also indicated that an appropriate application might be to do a microscopic examination of the area of the carpet that you're interested in.
Right,
correct?
I would cut out the carpet and take it back to the laboratory.
Okay, what if the carpet was the size of the entire foyer that he was luminoling?
You just mentioned the area directly in front of where Ms. Clarkson was seated.
That's the first area he luminoled.
If that's the area where you're looking for these small droplets, I would have excised that area of the carpet and taken it back to the laboratory.
Okay, what about the area going all the way up the stairs to the second floor? He
If you're-
luminoled that too.
That's fine. I wouldn't mind seeing the process of luminol done if you're looking for drag marks, footprints, larger objects that may be transferred onto the carpet.
Okay. What about the area of the bathroom? Would you excise the entire carpet in the entire bathroom area if you luminoled that too?
It depends on what you're looking for.
Okay. What about the wood paneling? Would you have suggested a better procedure would have been to take a crowbar and, for instance, remove all that wood paneling along the side of the stairway on that west wall and take that entire west wall paneling back to the crime lab?
The best procedure for something like that would be to do a microscopic examination at the scene.
Okay, and if he luminoled the banister, the area of the banister or the railing, would you also suggest that he remove all the banister pillars and take the entire banister back to the crime lab?
Well, I think you have things a little bit out of order. When you do a crime scene examination, luminol is one of the last things you do. The first thing you do, if you think that there's microscopic blood spatters on the wall or the banister, you carefully examine those at the scene.
Right.
If you find something that you feel is important, if, for example, the railing on the banister, you think you see droplets of blood on there, you may run a follow-up screening test at the scene, and if you feel that that banister rail is going to be important in your case, you take the banister rail with you.
Okay.
And then after you have done all of your investigative procedures you're going to do at your crime scene, then at that point that you would luminol for looking for blood that you might not have found by any other means.
Okay. You're aware that the procedure that Steve Renteria engaged in, you read his testimony, was exactly what you just described. That he, in fact, looked very closely at the carpet area in front of Lana Clarkson first. You're aware of that?
Objection, that states the testimony in terms of, he never said he used a microscope at the carpet.
I didn't say
The question doesn't say microscope. He said very carefully. The objection's overruled.
You're aware that he did, in fact, visually inspect the carpet area in front of Ms. Clarkson very carefully, looking for blood specifically.
Mr. Jackson, I'm going to have to take your word for it. I don't remember word for word that everything I read in the form of transcripts.
Oh, okay, sir, and I'm not trying to test
I believe you if that's what you're trying to tell me.
Okay.
Repeat the question, please.
Let me ask it this way then, because I'm not, I know you didn't study it and memorize it. I'm not trying to embarrass you at all. Let me ask the question a little bit different way. I think we can get there. Would you say that it was proper procedure based on what you just told the jurors is a proper procedure if Steve Renteria did a visual examination as closely as he could visually in daylight with lights on in the foyer area of the carpet area all the way over to the wall? That would be proper procedure, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then he looked on the paneling and got very close to the paneling and looked visually as best he could all over the paneling of the area adjacent to the stairway across from Ms. Clarkson. That would be appropriate.
Yes.
Then if Mr. Renteria then went to the banister and saw a transfer mark of blood on the banister that was very obvious, if he then looked on the banister going all the way up the stairs and on the vertical pillars holding the banister up, whatever those are called, visually examined those and found no blood on any of those areas visually, that would be an appropriate procedure.
Yes.
And he did all that during daylight with the aid of ambient daylight as well as lights on inside the foyer area. That would be appropriate.
Yes.
And if Mr. Renteria indicated that he used a flashlight to even more fully illuminate those areas on the carpet, on the west wall, we'll call that the west wall, the panel wall, and on the banister going all the way up, if he did all that, that would be appropriate as at least a first step, correct?
As a first step, yes.
Okay. You indicated that luminol is sort of the last step at a crime scene to make a determination of blood. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And on that subject matter, Mr. Pex, are you aware that Mr. Renteria actually came back the next day, and in fact, it was the last thing that was done? At night, the day after the crime scene had already been cleared, that's the point at which he began to dim all the lights, blacken out the room, and do the luminol. That would be appropriate, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you're aware that, or are you aware that during the course of doing his luminol exam, he used a power sprayer?
Okay.
All right. Are you aware, would it be proper procedure if instead of just spraying one swipe, if Mr. Renteria used that power sprayer and went back and forth over and over in certain areas of the carpet and specifically was looking visually for the luminescence of any blood stains? That would be an appropriate way to try and find those blood stains, correct?
You can oversaturate an area with the liquid that you're spraying.
Okay.
And dissolve any blood that's there, or that you could cause it to run further down into the matting of the carpet.
Sure. But if you were experienced in this technique, that would be something that you would avoid against, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you have no reason to believe, based on everything you've reviewed concerning Mr. Renteria, that he was anything but very experienced in this?
I can't attest to his experience, but from what you're telling me, he was experienced at doing this test.
Okay. You're aware that, and luminol is although I always get this mixed up, and maybe you can help me with this. See, I get mixed up. I'm trying to think it through before I say it. It's extremely sensitive, but not specific, correct?
Yes.
All right, that's about as clear as mud in my mind. Okay, let's see if we can flesh that out just a little bit for the jurors. Not specific means it will pick up metals, iron in blood, but it'll also pick up metals, for instance, actual metal that has been transferred to a carpet, for instance.
That's correct.
It'll also pick up, I think it picks up onion, doesn't it?
I have had reactions with onions, and, beets, juices, things that have peroxidases in them.
Okay, so there are other things. So that's what we mean by it's not super specific, but it's extraordinarily sensitive, correct?
Yes, it's to diluted blood.
As a matter of fact, in some of your publications, or at least one of your publications, you have indicated that you've seen blood dilutions of 1 to 100 million parts luminesce under luminol.
That was taken from another research article. That's not my personal observation.
Okay, but you referenced that.
I published that in the article, yes.
Okay, so there is published data to that effect.
Yes.
So in other words, luminol is extraordinarily sensitive.
Yes.
And you're aware, or are you aware that, for instance, when Mr. Renteria luminoled the foyer area, there was a metal strip on the bottom of the door, the rear door. As that door opens and closes, it drags along the carpet fibers. And that actually luminesced, and he made note of that. Are you aware of it?
No.
Okay. That wouldn't surprise you, though?
No.
All right. There were other areas, or are you aware that there were other areas? Well, I guess I got ahead of myself. Let me just finish off on that first thought about the foyer area before I move into the bathroom. You're aware from your review of all the materials in this case, and I know it's been somewhat of a scant review, that no blood or anything else luminesced in the area from Ms. Clarkson over to the west wall.
I've been told that, yes.
All right. You're aware that nothing luminesced on that entire wood-paneled wall. There was no blood, nothing to suggest blood or blood spatter on that wall, correct?
That maybe, yes.
Okay. You're aware that on the banister, and I'm walking through the foyer in my mind, so you'll forgive me, on the banister that curled around on the bottom, the only portion of that banister that luminesced was the visual blood that indicated a transfer pattern on that banister, correct?
I recall something about that, yes.
You're aware that there was no blood to the right, as we're facing west, to the right of the banister going toward that adjacent bathroom area. No blood luminesced on the ground or the floor in that area, correct?
Mr. Jackson, I was never at the scene, and as you're describing these different areas, I have not looked at the evidence, and I've never been to the scene, so I can't say for certain yes and no to your answers,
Okay.
but I have no reason to disbelieve you at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'll change my question a little bit. You would have no quarrel if the testimony was nothing luminesced in the bathroom area.
That'd
I'm
be
sorry,
fine.
in the area adjacent to the bathroom.
Yeah, and the relationship of this area to where Ms. Clarkson is, I'm not well acquainted with these distances that you're talking.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
A final question on that point, just to kind of finish off that thought process. You're aware that Steve Renteria actually luminoled the entire staircase as well, correct?
That would be something to do. I would do the same.
Okay, and are you aware that no blood whatsoever, no blood spatter or anything else luminesced on that stairway going all the way up to that second floor landing?
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Kinney Bodden asked you, and here's my guidepost. We're going to change gears a little bit and talk about the gun. We're still sort of talking about luminol, but I want to change gears and ask you a couple of questions about what Ms. Kinney Bodden brought up about the weapon itself. You indicated that, and I think what you were suggesting, Mr. Pax, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're not sure the luminol procedure was done correctly because there wasn't blood found underneath the gun on the carpet area under the gun?
What I said was that if it is reasonable to assume that the blood was on the weapon, And there are photographs that I saw that suggest that what I see on there is blood, that it's probably in a liquid form when it gets to the floor. One would have the expectation that some of that blood would transfer from the gun to the floor.
Okay, fair enough. And that's where what I want to ask you about. That is making a very, very broad assumption. The big if in that is if it got to the floor when it was still wet, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There is another explanation for that gun being on the carpet and the carpet not luminescing any blood, correct?
If the blood was totally dry and there was no transfer then of that blood to the carpet, then it may not be detectable.
And for instance, one explanation for that blood drying is if the gun was, for instance, wiped off or wiped down, that would certainly thin out that blood, vastly increasing any drying time for the blood, correct?
Yes.
All right. And that blood could dry very, very quickly on the gun.
Yes.
And if that gun was already wiped down, and if there was evidence that the blood had been moved or removed, we'll use that phraseology, and it was dried, and then it was placed beneath her ankle. Later, that gun was removed and that area was luminoled, and it came up with no luminescence whatsoever. That would not surprise you, correct?
Yeah, you could come up with either result. You could find some, or you may not find some.
Okay. You would not necessarily expect to find to find blood on the carpet smeared underneath the gun if the gun was already dry when it was placed down there.
It's difficult to say because I've seen several circumstances where people have stepped in blood that was dried, like on carpet, for example, and then taken another step and they have transferred dried blood as a powdery substance to a new location on the carpet. So if the blood was, even though it was dried, it just depended upon the abrasiveness and its actions along with the carpet could remove some even dried blood as flakes onto the carpet. So either possibility exists.
Okay.
Maybe there, may not be there.
All right, and that brings up a good point, actually. If the gun is placed down, I'm going to give you two different hypotheticals. What you're just saying is if the gun is placed down on the carpet in somewhat of a dried state, then it's kicked across the carpet. Even though it's dried, you may expect to see some flaking or dusting off of some of that dried blood, and that would luminesce. That streak mark might luminesce across the floor, correct?
It might.
Okay. However, if you had the gun dried, this is my gun, if the gun was already wiped off and dried, and it was placed on the carpet where you saw it underneath Miss Clarkson's leg, and it was not disturbed until the police carefully picked it up, you would not necessarily expect to see blood luminesce underneath that portion of the carpet.
Well, the possibility of another plane crash didn't happen because passengers noticed this. What the actual fuck is happening, dude? Numerous passengers were evacuated after United Airlines plane caught fire during takeoff. a United Airlines flight from Houston to New York was evacuated after an engine fire forced the crew to abort takeoff. United Flight 1382 was preparing to depart from George Bush International Airport at 8:35 this morning on Sunday this morning when the issue was reported. Some passengers had to evacuate using emergency slides while others exited through the jet bridge. According to the Houston Fire Department, video footage shows passengers standing. What the fuck, dude?
You may or may not.
If you didn't, and in this case, assume for purposes of my question that you didn't, that would certainly be an explanation for why you didn't. The gun was already dry and it was placed there.
That could be, yes.
Thank you.
Crazy.
I'm going to use another show and tell, and this one's going to include Mr. Dixon. There's something that's kind of been hanging out there, and I want to do a little demonstration, all right? Miss Kinney Bodden asked you, Mr. Dixon looks scared right now.
He knows you.
True enough. There was a question, yeah, please. There was a question about Miss Clarkson's legs, okay? And I know you weren't at the crime scene. I'm going to move this over so jurors can get a look at what we're doing. There was a question about Miss Clarkson's legs and a taser wire that you saw in photographs under her leg.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I think Ms. Zahab may have People's 63 for identification up on the computer. I see. Okay, you see that photograph?
Yes.
All right, that's a picture. I know you weren't at the crime scene, but just assume for our purposes that is a picture, a close-up
this woman hanging
photograph
out.
of Ms.
You've been lurking
Clarkson's
back here?
legs as she was found
You're
at the
having a
crime
good
scene. If you look toward the top left of the photograph, you can actually see between her legs, it appears that the gun is on the ground. And if you look toward her right foot, you see that. If you look toward her right foot, specifically toward her right heel, it appears that there is something beneath the right heel, correct?
In terms of the wire?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, you can see that. And I'm going to ask Ms. Zahab to highlight that heel and that area, maybe even a little bit more. Okay. Can you see that? Now it's extremely an extreme close-up of that wire underneath the heel. Do you see that?
Yes.
Does it appear to you that you can see a shadow toward the forward portion of the heel where the arrow is right now?
Yes.
That would indicate that that heel is actually elevated off the ground to a certain degree. Although minimally, to a certain degree, it's elevated, correct?
Yes.
All right.
In relation to the flash of the camera. You can see that.
Yes, and of course, I'm talking about in relation to the carpet, it appears that it is elevated to a certain degree because there is in fact a shadow underneath it, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
I wish I could get you something.
I'm going to lay
Do you have PO boxes?
a cord in front of Mr. Dixon's feet, and all he has to do as the model is just sit here. And if you need to, Mr. Pex, if you might not, I mean, if you might want to step down here so we can see what we're doing, I want to make sure that kind of everybody is on the same page. Can you see, and Your Honor, with the with the court's permission, the jurors need to stand up.
Jurors can stand up, sure.
All right, the only thing I want to ask you about is, in fact, it appears that there is a taser wire at least partially under the right foot of Miss Clarkson, correct?
Yes.
All right. If in fact, and Mr. Dixon, if you will lean either your body or there you go, straighten your legs a bit. His right foot appears to be somewhat elevated. I'm not trying to approximate exactly how her foot is, but it appears to be somewhat elevated, correct?
Yes.
All right. If I kick this wire to the right, do you see how that wire ended up under his heel?
Yes.
You'll agree with me that Mr. Dixon has not moved his foot at all since I kicked that wire, correct?
Correct.
You will also agree with me that the way that the wire is situated under his right heel right now is consistent with how the taser wire appears on Ms. Clarkson's heel, correct?
Except that her foot is laying much lower than his is.
I understand.
Dealing with a wire that's much smaller in diameter.
Correct. And as a matter of fact, we have a smaller diameter wire. Can I see that?
You know, before you go on, there's just one problem, and the poor television technicians are having a heart attack. I can see what happened. You know, they're under strict orders, and they have not made a mistake yet not to photograph the jurors. And
Yes.
the jurors, when they stand up, get into camera range.
Then,
I don't know how we're going to do this.
you know, I don't either.
We okay? I see we're all right. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
We're okay?
All right.
Okay. I've never seen anybody sit down so fast. All right. Mr. Dixon, do me a favor. Would you turn 180 degrees from where you were because I didn't
We're
realize.
just not going to get the
Correct. That way. What I did was I asked Mr. Dixon, and he was facing the other way. For your benefit, the jurors may not have been able to see what I did. If you will keep your feet about where they are, if I, let's say that this cord approximates the taser wire, and I kick that wire once again, where did the wire appear to go to you, Mr. Pax?
Well, it goes under the heel.
Okay. Not inconsistent, although this is not a perfect scientific approximation, not inconsistent with what we're looking at in that photograph, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And Mr. Dixon's foot did not move when I kicked the wire.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, would you...
You want to mark Mr. Dixon?
Dude, he's so funny, man. Like, he was waiting to just lay one out.
Yes, sir.
Basically, for the record,
If this judge went this cool,
I asked Mr. Dixon to sit comfortably in the chair with his right leg extended. I placed a a computer cord on the ground adjacent to his right foot and just in front of it. I kicked the cord toward the back of Mr. Dixon. The cord ended up wedging itself, if you will, toward the heel of his right shoe, and that's what Mr. Pex was describing for us.
Does anybody wish to disagree with that?
Except for the fact that it should indicate that his feet, all his heels were on the ground and his feet were about 2 inches above.
I have no objection with that
Okay.
representation. That's accurate.
Thank you.
It's in the angle about 45 degrees from what I can see.
In any event, okay. I think we have a clear picture, and the jurors were able to get a view. I'm just trying to make a record here. All right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Have you got a ways to go?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take our noon recess. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition, 1:30 this afternoon. The witness will return. Thank you.
That was interesting, yeah. The difference between Bodden and Ajax, kind of questioning this guy. Yeah, it felt like possibly Ajax is, again, I saw Motion to Scream say it. Seems like there's a lot more maybe assumptions coming from this expert, James Plex. But we're going to go into part 3 next Sunday, I would assume. And we're going to be hanging out with old James Plex for a little bit longer. Everybody coming through here this morning, thank you all so much. Let me rephrase this morning. I got a lot of plugs to do. Let me put this in here first. Let me get the second channel up, the wrestling channel. Again, if you're hearing that and you're like, well, I'm not a wrestling fan, what the hell do I give a shit about that? Well, one thing about it is it's insane stories from wrestling, from backstage, from on the road. Horrendous stories. The one dropping today is from after a wrestling show. A group of guys get into a van. They're all drinking. They're all partying. They're heading to the next town for the next show the next night. And it gets dark. Andre the Giant is featured in this one. And it is a wild story that I just uncovered. And it's a little known story. So we're going to see how it goes. I'm going to drop the channel in there. Again, it drops at 3:45 p.m. today. So if you guys could give that a follow. I mean, that's the second channel. If you're into true crime, you're going to dig a lot of these stories that I do over there. They're pretty crazy. The one that I just did, which is now approaching 60,000 views, which is killing it, fucking awesome, which keeps me motivated to keep rocking and rolling. It is a horrendous story about a sexual assault that happened after a wrestling show with some wrestlers who met a girl in a bar. It's fucked up. It's horrible. Tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here. Come on back. Lauren Conlon is going to be joining me. A real deal investigative journalist is going to be hanging out. Somebody that's been on top of the Jeffrey Epstein case from the beginning in the heart of New York City. We're going to be having her on here tonight talking about the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, and it's going to be dark as well. Do not want to miss that, folks. Thank you all so much. What a great day. I hope everyone has a great Sunday, and we'll be definitely seeing you this week. Let's rock. Thank you, guys. Love you.
Nothing to see here.